In the fall of 1845, the bright green leaves of potato plants dotted the Irish countryside. For over 200 years, the South American vegetable had thrived in Ireland's rough terrain and unpredictable weather. Packed with carbohydrate, vitamins, and minerals, the potato was a remarkably nutrient-rich crop that made it easy for less wealthy families to maintain a balanced diet. But the mid-19th century, potatoes had supplanted other staple foods, and since British mandate ensured Ireland more valuable agricultural products were exported, roughly half the country's 8.5 million residents lived almost entirely on potatoes. But when harvesting began in 1845, farmers found their potato blackened and shriveled. Those who ate them suffered severe stomach cramps and even death. Today, we know the crop was Phytophthora infestans, a fungus that flourished in the season unusually damp weather. But at the time, it was simply called the blight. The fungus likely originated in Americas, traveling across the Atlantic on ships, and while it destroyed potato harvests across Europe, wealthier countries than us today generally fare better, as they had more resources to draw on. Meanwhile, the southern and western regions of Ireland were already impoverished and entirely dependent on the single crop, making them disproportionately vulnerable. The impact of food insecurity are often most severe at poverty line, but while the failed harvest created a class crisis, the government's response turned it into a national catastrophe. For centuries, Ireland had been under varying degrees of English control, and by 1845, it was part of the United Kingdom, with its government based in London. During the famine's first year, this distant ruling body imported corn from North America and offered the Irish employment on public works projects. But this relief only caused more problems. Imported food was poorly distributed and offered insufficient nutrition, making the previously healthy population more vulnerable to disease and increasing maternal and child mortality. Worse still, the British continued to export Ireland grain and livestock. Meanwhile, the public works project required a lengthy shift of growing manual labor far from where most workers lived. For example, just one of the country's tragic incidents is the story of Thomas Malone, who walked 18 kilometers round trip to work every day. One night, exhausted and starving, he collapsed and died just before reaching home, leaving behind his wife and 6 children. Despite the year's country's tragedies, many families managed to scrape by, but in 1846, the damp weather returned and the blight worsened, impacting 75% of Ireland's potato yield. British relief efforts diminished substantially in the famine's second year, and while international aid helped save lives, the overall need was enormous. And the crisis went on. The government limited who were eligible for relief and tasked Ireland with funding the relief efforts themselves by increasing local taxes. Most modern historians view these disastrous policies as stemming from the mix of toxic religious ideology, laissez-faire economic policies, and political infighting. British news sources classically depicted the Irish as lazy, simple-minded alcoholics, and some London decision-makers believed the famine was God's punishment for these sinful behaviors. Other government officials purposely blocked efforts to provide meaningful relief due to internal and political rivalries. As with famines and food insecurity today, it was a lack of resources preventing the British from aiding Ireland, but rather a lack of political will. 7 years after the blight began, Ireland's weather pattern returned to normal, and the potato crop finally stabilized, but over 1 million people have perished from starvation, malnutrition, and disease. Between 1 and 2 million more fled the country, beginning the trend that dropped Ireland's population to half its pre-famine levels by the 1920s. Today, climate change is making extreme weather more common and sustained, leading countries' agricultural communities to face similar struggles. Just as in Ireland, farmers living on the margins are increasingly facing starvation, malnutrition, and disease due to global weather patterns for which they bear little responsibilities. But history doesn't have to repeat itself. If governments and institutions can provide the kind of aid these regions need. Relief efforts that are coordinated and ongoing provide sufficient nutrition to prevent disease and offer with compassion rather than judgment.